Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to the Cluster Puck Podcast, part of the MHRT Network here at Center Ice. I am Nick. Typically beside me is Brit, but she's taking the week off. She's got some hockey tournaments for her kids, and so she's traveling. So we wish Mac the best of luck and his team. So you'll have to excuse Brit for this week. That being said, hopefully you guys have had a good week. Lots of stuff has happened, even up to the last hour or so. So we're going to talk about everything, and then we'll kind of regroup and get Brit's input next week as we go into Stanley Cup Final has come and passed. The Florida Panthers are the 2023-24 Stanley Cup champions. The award ceremony just hit. Some good news there, which we'll get into. And some other offseason moves regarding some Avalanche players and the draft. So we'll kind of cover all those here in just a moment. But before we do, don't forget, everyone, to like and subscribe. Follow the MHRT Network so you can get notified when shows like the Cluster Puck Podcast go live. You can follow them on the various social media platforms of your choosing. If you want to follow us, you can follow us at the Cluster Puck Podcast on Facebook and at Cluster Puck Avs on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. So let's kind of dissect it order by order here. First things first, like I stated before, season's over. Florida Panthers, in a thrilling fashion, are Stanley Cup champions. For the first time in their history, 30-year history, they finally get to hoist Lord Stanley after losing it to the Vegas Golden Knights last year. They beat the Edmonton Oilers in 7 games. And wow, what just the series that I didn't know was going to be. And unfortunately, it was a playoff run, or excuse me, a Stanley Cup comeback of the ages, cut short by a final 2-1. But let's talk about that for a second. So ultimately, within the that 30-year history that the Florida Panthers have had, they have gone couple times. So they lost to the Avalanche, ironically, back in 1996, swept 4-0. They lost to the Vegas Golden Knights in the last season, so 22-23 season, in 5 games. But this one went the distance, which, to be honest, I called it, but I didn't want to say I called it, right? Because if you remember a couple episodes back, I stated that in this Stanley Cup final, you will see one of two things happen. You will either see a Florida sweep or it go to 7 games, and then it just kind of goes to a toss-up at that point. That was kind of how the matchup was faring at the time. And it took the 7 games, but it didn't take it in the route that people thought. So just kind of to recap, the Florida Panthers won the first 3 games of that final, and they were well on their way to a sweep. Just Bobrovsky played out of his mind in game 1, just stonewalled everything. They win handedly game 2, then they head to Edmonton, handedly win game 3, even after there was some push and shove. And to be honest, I was like, this is over, right? It's like it's another sweep, hasn't happened in a good long while. It's bound to happen, but at the same time, I was thinking, it's kind of terrible. Edmonton gets this far. They beat Dallas in 6. They, all kinds of things. And just to basically choke, 4-0. I thought it was over and whatnot. And ultimately, I called it, right? I was like, well, I did say a Florida sweep, so here we are. Well, the Edmonton Oilers had other plans, you see. Game 4, that was where the pendulum swung heavily to the land of oil. And the Oilers just blow the doors off of Florida, scoring 8 goals. 8 goals, which is almost near a record if I want to get my information correct. And that just swayed everything, right? So you're thinking, okay, maybe gentlemen sweep. Go back to Florida in 5, lose that game. Go back to Edmonton in 6 and lose that game. And here we are facing game 7. So ultimately, it ended up being a very good series. The question then becomes, Ali asks here, did Edmonton ultimately end up outscoring Florida? I believe they did. I think they actually ultimately did. I bet you I could tally that up right now and figure that out. However, while I'm doing that, it made for a really good comeback. And since I didn't have skin in the game, I was kind of just fair weather, didn't really mind whatever happened. I got the wrong season up, but ultimately, Allie, to answer your question, I think Edmonton heavily outscored Florida. But since I didn't have any skin in the game, I thought, okay, it'll be a great series. It's been a great series now that this potential comeback of the ages is about to happen. And that game 7 was probably one of the better game 7s. Obviously, I think the last game 7 was 2019 when the Blues won. But this one was close. 2-1 is nothing to gawk at. That's a typical game 7 kind of score. And it just made for kind of this storybook ending for Florida, where they had to regain, or refine whatever was lost, this mojo that they had that was taken away. And for Edmonton, it was the motive was to pull off the comeback of the century. Because a lot of people are saying that it hasn't been done. It has been done, but not for 80 years, like a long, long time. At least as far as Stanley Cup Finals go. And ultimately, Florida gets to hoist the cup. Bobrovsky shook out of whatever slump that he had. And it made for a really good final. So a lot of first-time winners. I think the only two, from what I read, the only two that are now second-time winners are Verhaeghe, who won with Tampa a few years ago, and then Vladimir Tarasenko, who obviously won with the St. Louis Blues. So a lot of first-time winners. Super happy for all of them. Huge congratulations to the Florida Panthers. Obviously, we know what it's like to win a Stanley Cup recently, so we're pretty thrilled about that. So yeah, super fun all around. Can't wait to see the celebrations. Can't wait to see kind of what people do with the cup. I think it's already been in the Atlantic Ocean. It's already, I think Roberto Luongo ate spaghetti out of it or pasta out of it or something like that. It was just at the award ceremony. It gets around, and it's gonna see some stuff. I can guarantee you that. So the question that I got then was, how does this fare in finals history? Like, is it one of the best? Is it, where does it sit? And it's kind of a subjective question, right? Because it all depends on people's opinion. Like, if you were to ask me, anything that goes to 7 drags it out the distance, it's on the best tier, right? As long as there's no personal bias in there, which in this case there was none. I enjoy when those types of things go 7. I want a good series. I want something that lasts, to have more hockey and as long a hockey as I can because then it just sweeps right into the draft, right into awards, right into free agency. So you don't have to wait a long time, right? So makes for a good easy transition into the off-season stuff. So as far as overall game 7s though, it's tough to say. I mean, this one ultimately has its own storylines, right? Like I said before, it's Florida that went up 3-0. Edmonton comes charging right back. And then this game 7 goes to, will it become the greatest comeback, or will it become they stop the greatest comeback? And that in its own right, I think, is a really good storyline. So if I had to put it somewhere, it's pretty near the top, honestly. Now, is it my favorite one of all time? No, this one's my favorite of all time, 22. But it's in that tier of just really good finals. They each had a different kind of motive, different mentalities. It started off, and I will admit this, it started off as one that was going to be, sweep. That's it. But luckily it didn't. And it just made, I think, again, top tier, somewhere up close to one of the good ones, because in my short life I have seen a few. So I enjoyed it. It was very good. So again, congratulations to the Florida Panthers on their Stanley Cup victory. Okay, so let's move on here. Next item of business, we have a couple of things that happened right after the finals were finished. So they relate to the Colorado Avalanche. So first one is that Andrew Cogliano, and I don't want to say I necessarily spoke this into existence, but I spoke it into existence. Andrew Cogliano decided to hang up the skates after, oh gosh, I can't remember how many years. It was a long time, good long while. He decided to officially retire from the NHL, and he's going to maintain a front office job with the Colorado Avalanche. So that's, again, super exciting, super happy for the guy. And again, we knew that this was kind of going to happen and whatnot. And kind of like I said, literally last week, that was kind of on par where you're like, you could see it happening, but I wish it would be that he retires, and he even got the front office job to boot, right? So super happy for him. I really enjoy this move. I think it's a smart move, especially for him and his family. Fair, all things considered, because the end of last season, he broke his neck, right? He played one more season, did a very good job. So I'm happy with this move. So he's going to be with the front office for the Avalanche organization. The only thing we need to get now is for Eric Johnson and Jack Johnson, for that matter, to kind of hang him up, and obviously have Eric Johnson come back to the Avs and get some kind of a mentor role, office role, coaching role, something like that. And Jack Johnson can be there for like cheerleading or just locker room morale, whatever you want to call it. He's a good the good type of toxic to have in your locker room. So only time will tell. Obviously, there's still a lot of stuff that needs to happen. Free agency is going to hit here in a few days. A lot of rumblings are starting to happen, and because of that, you needed to start getting people signed and locked up and stuff like that. And Britt and I have mentioned this a few times, that we wanted to see two people specifically, Casey Mittelstadt and Jonathan Drouin, and then a honorable mention third, Sean Walker. Well, we got one of those to sign over here a couple of days ago. Casey Mittelstadt signed a 3-year deal, 3-year extension with the Colorado Avalanche for a $5.75 million AAV. So where does that rank? What does that do? Because you have to consider a few things, right? Avalanche we're kind of capped out at the top, especially with obtaining Mittelstadt and obtaining Walker, and Duhaime and all those guys in the trade market during the middle of the season last year. They're probably going to have to let a few of them walk, unfortunately, because Mittelstadt 5.75, even though the cap has gone up, he ate up that extra cap that's jumped, right? And then a little bit more. Is it a fair deal? Yeah, a little high for me. Just personally, I would have given like a flat 5, and that would have been a good number. I think it would have been fair. But if he plays to that level, obviously the value kind of claims itself. Very similar to like the Val Nichushkin signing that we did last season, where we signed him to like a 6.25, somewhere around there, 6-year deal, and he played into it. Like all that side business aside for him, he played very well in the regular season, right? You could tell when he was on the ice, when you missed him, when he wasn't. He was very noticeable. Very important piece, and he played into that price point. So with Casey Mittelstadt now hopefully being that solidified 2C that the Avalanche have been desperately trying to find, I think the hope here is that he becomes, that they pay him, and now he's got to have this kind of, I need to show that I'm paid for this, because the Avalanche aren't going to stand for just, hey, we gave you all this money and you're not producing as our 2C, we're trading you. Right. They will. I know the Avalanche. They are not ones to mess around, especially that their cup window's open. They have a really smart front office with Joe Sakic and Chris McFarland. They're not just going to sit around and say, okay, now take your time to play into this contract. No, it's like, we're paying you now to get results now. So I think he'll do it. Obviously, we're going to see a full season with him. So I'd be pretty excited to see what he is capable of in this coming season. Obviously, he was one of the highest scorers, if not the highest scorer, when we obtained him from Buffalo in that trade with Bo Byram. So I'm excited to see what a full season will do for him if he develops into, fingers crossed, as Nazem Kadri Jr., so to speak, where he just has these outrageously good years, and then hopefully on his contract year we have 3 cups by then, but for sure by that year. It'll be fun to see. So that just means now you have you're eating up cap space. So who's your priority, right? Because at this point, and this is kind of where I'm going to be a bit of a Debbie Downer, at this point, I find it difficult to say you're going to be able to keep even 4 of the 6 people that you need, or 3 of the 5. I think a couple guys are going to have to leave. So who's going to be your priority? To me, obviously, the answer is Jonathan Drouin, and that should be one of the first guys they head straight after. And honestly, I think they've been having discussions. I haven't heard anything as far as talks going awry, but I would be one to think that they've started talking. Even Nathan MacKinnon has kind of probably championed for it, stuff like that. So I'm of the opinion that they'll, first day even of free agency, I think they'll lock up Jonathan Drouin, hopefully 4 years at $3 million, $4 million, somewhere around there. Obviously, he did a really good job at a minimum under $1 million pay for the last season. So I think that probably gets a significant bump. 3, I think, is good. 4 is fair, still fair. But only time will tell and see kind of where that takes us. But again, I think for the sake of the team's integrity, and because we brought Jonathan Drouin out of his shell, and I don't want to say, well, look what we did, you should kind of return the favor. Obviously, there's teams that saw exactly what happened, right? Will it be the same next year? We don't know. But if I were the Avalanche, I would kind of use that in my back pocket and say, hey, we can see you're comfortable here, and then use that to their advantage to say, hey, you produce and we like having you here. Will you take this offer? And I think he liked it enough here that, because obviously with MacKinnon being his friend from the Halifax Mooseheads, teammates for a long, long time back in pre-NHL days, I'd like to think that he would take a deal. 4 years, like I said, a 4x4 is probably the max I'd be willing to give him. A 4x3 is probably a little better, but again, it's kind of this push and shove game, and it could be great, could work out great. He could decide to take a different direction. Obviously, not what we want to have happen, but it could. So be interesting to see kind of what happens here in the next few days. Sean Walker, as far as he's concerned, obviously he's a D-man that I want to sign pretty badly as well, because he did a very good job. He came right in on the scene, and there was a lot of times where I was like, I swear that's like Logan O'Connor or Nathan MacKinnon skating out there. He was quick. His puck vision was great. I mean, it did lack at times, but who's didn't? Scored some goals. I got to see him score a goal live. That was pretty cool. But his defense was just really solid. Like, it was, he had the speed match, he had the stick handling, even very like Cale Makar-esque, but he was just like a broader guy, right? And not to say Cale Makar's not, he's a big dude, but just Sean Walker had this kind of beefy persona about him. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I would like to see him locked up in a deal. Now, as far as term and money is concerned, I don't know, right? Like money, that's going to be tough, because obviously being on the lower priorities, so to speak, right? I'm going to say X on the price. I don't know. Term, I'd like to see him for a good long while, right? 4 years, 5 years. He did a good job, and I think that should be rewarded in his play. So we'll have to just kind of see what route that takes, because I know there's a lot of teams kicking the tires on him. I know the Utah Hockey Club here, they're going to be interested in him, considering they need nothing but defensemen. So he's going to get pursued pretty heavily in free agency. So could be back, could not be. He's one where it's kind of the scales are kind of imbalanced, so it could just be it quickly tips one way or the other. I guess we'll just have to see. So those are the kind of the guys that we're looking forward to. We're kind of paying attention to the most. With that being said, though, free agency is set to begin, right? And I already talked just barely about the 3 guys. One of them signed, 2 of them hopefully signed. But that was the question that Britt and I were even discussing up until today was, will the Avs even be in the market? You know, because if they kind of go hunting for people or keeping people, right, instead of going and hunting for other people, it kind of keeps it all self-contained, right? And maybe that's their route. Obviously, a lot people like playing here. I mean, you remember the Cup year when we got Josh Manson and Arturi Lehkonen. They both signed deals very, very quickly with the Avalanche. Similarly, last year, right? We had players that wanted to sign long-term deals, right? I think this is no different, right? This is going to be, in my opinion, I don't want to say it's maybe like the smart move, because obviously you want to go see and get as better team as you can, and if an opportunity presents itself, well, then yeah, go for it. But a good move, a right move, is to still stay in house as much as you can. And when I say in house, obviously we talked last week about the call ups of like Kovalenko, Sam Malinsky to fill in those roles of it. You know, since Cogliano's retired, Jack Johnson might be on his way out, might not re-sign him. Maybe that, but to shore that up, or to maybe have that veteran leadership or presence or whatever you want to call it out on the ice for next season, the 24-25 season, you probably would have to go after one or two guys. And that tends to be typical. You know, a lot of people try to bring in one or two new faces or three or something like that. And I don't think it's any different here, but I would like to try and keep it as in-house as possible by re-signing Drouin, Check, and Walker, people like that. So we'll just have to see. Obviously, there could be just this deal that just sparks everything that the Avalanche are involved with, new people coming in. It's a big trade, and it could be for anybody, right? Hopefully it's not for anybody on the top line or second line for that matter, but you never know what could happen. Opportunities present themselves in very, very strange ways. That being said, as well in free agency, the Avalanche, and I'll kind of tune into this one here in this transition. The Avalanche do have a first round pick in this upcoming draft, and we'll talk about that one in just a second. But as could be used as trade bait. They could trade away their first round pick, because the draft at the time of this recording is tomorrow, June 28th. It could not be theirs within the 24-hour span that they got the draft. So it's a good trade bait, obviously, in the NHL. For those of you who don't know or might be new to this, in hockey, first round, especially if it's like top 10 or something like that, but first rounders overall are a pretty coveted pick, and a lot of people would give up quite a bit for it. So the Avalanche, for first time in 4 or 5 years, it feels like a long time, finally have a first round pick that they haven't traded away, months prior, years prior. So, we'll talk about that in a second. But again, it's a trade chip, right? A lot of people could want to go after that. So that being said, this draft that we do have, the Avalanche have the 24th overall pick. We're going to kind of shift gears into the draft itself. 24th overall pick, right? Decent enough considering the Avs have constantly gone to the playoffs and stuff like that. They tend to be kind of around that area anyways. So with that 24th overall pick, though, who do you go after? What do you do, right? Because again, it's been a while since we've had a first rounder, so this is one where you got to kind of be careful, so to speak, as far as who you're getting and for what reason. What do the Avalanche need? So for me, I would probably say, if you're keeping the draft pick, I would probably say you're going to want to look for a skilled forward in this. I think your defense is just fine with your top pairing of Makar and Taves, your second pairing of Manson Girard / Walker if he comes back, something like that. Like, your defense is actually pretty defined. It's that last depth, maybe fourth line, third line even, that I'm like, in a little bit, you're going to need some help with that, because obviously terms, people getting old, stuff like that takes effect. So there's a couple guys as far as forwards are concerned that I personally was looking at. I saw a lot of reports here that claimed him as well, putting them in various locations, but I've narrowed it down to two that I would be okay with. Right? Obviously, there's plenty of guys that could fit the bill, but as far as Avalanche style, there's two that I did enjoy and did agree with. The first one for me was Igor. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna botch this. I'm sorry. Igor Chernyshov, I believe is how it is. KHL player. 18 years old. Obviously, the one thing with him though is you're gonna need to be patient with this because he's in the KHL. Obviously, he will need time to finish his seasons there and then come over. Obviously, when drafting KHL people, it takes a year or two for them to finally come back. Obviously, we're seeing that with the Flyers and Fedotov and other players similar to that. But I think that Chernyshov is a good pick, and the reason why is just because he's big, but he's also skilled. Like he's shown his ability to work and maneuver his body around, attack, and then his net like outrageous depth. But the little highlights and stuff that I saw and the reports that I did saw, I said, this could be a good fit because if stuff happens potentially with Val Nichushkin, that could be a replacement. And the big difference being that it sounds like Chernyshov is quicker. Now, obviously, again, the Nichushkin stuff aside, he could be a similar style guy to Val Nichushkin after he develops after a year or two, comes into the league. Same with kind of Kovalenko. We'll have to see where Kovalenko, but Igor Chernyshov is one that I think is would be a good fit for the Avalanche. There was one here that Graham said, Bodinka. Don't know too much about him. I think his game as well is very skill based. Wouldn't mind to see him as well, Graham. I think it's a good pick. Again, Avalanche have their ways, and if it ends up being Bodinka, then excellent. Again, I'm on board with it. I don't mind it. I know there were a few others that the Avalanche or people were even suggesting, as far as like Liam Greentree, Eric Emery, Egor Surin was another one. Surin, I think is how it's pronounced, but a few that could dance around that area. But I digress here. The second one that I think, again, could be a really good fit because the Avalanche name in the game is speed, right? Trevor Connolly in the USHL, I think also could potentially fit because, again, like I said, Avalanche really do pride themselves on speed. If you haven't watched an Avalanche game, you will notice that they are fast, especially when you have the likes of Nathan McKinnon, Logan O'Connor, Cale Makar, very, very fast skaters. And it sounds like, and from what I've seen, that this Trevor Connolly is a pretty fast kid. His game is largely based on speed, skill as well, and his on ice vision. Apparently is also very good. I think it'd be kind of a home run hit as well if they go and get Trevor Connolly, because that type of player is someone that does need to develop. He'll go to the Eagles, and I think he'll do well there because, again, it's feeder team, right? That what the son sees the father do, he'll do as well, right? So the Eagles are also based. They need that speed. They need that skill. And here it says he averaged 1.5 points in 52 games. First in the USHL among players with at least 30 games. Pretty good, right? That's actually pretty good because a point and a half, you think about this per game, right? He's out there assisting, helping out, scoring even in almost every game he plays. A big help, right? So those are the two that I would say, if you're keeping that 24th overall pick, keep your eyes on that one. Those two, I should say. Graham also asks, do I know much about Matvei Gridin? Unfortunately, I don't. Graham, hate to shut that down. Haven't read too much about him, unfortunately. Don't really know much. So if you do know something, obviously throw comments up here. I love having comments and people kind of interacting. Again, you're more than welcome to. Everybody's more than welcome to. I know I got a few people watching here. So that being said, that's my picks for who I think the Avalanche should go after. Will they tomorrow? Will they even have a pick tomorrow? Remains to be seen, right? But overall, those are my predictions. Now, speaking of predictions, Britt and I, for the longest time, we were trying to manifest destiny, man. I tell you what, when it came to end of season awards, which did just happen at the time of recording, probably an hour, 2 hours ago, I'd say, start a couple hours ago. And there were some nominees, specifically that of Cale Makar with the Norris and Nathan MacKinnon with the Hart Trophy, as well as the Ted Lindsay Award. So that being said, what did they do? If you haven't seen it yet, you're going to get spoilers here. I'm very sorry. It's already been out for a while, and most people are on the phone, so really shouldn't be spoiling anything. So in the Norris candidacy, the nominees were Roman Josi, Cale Makar, and Quinn Hughes of the Vancouver Canucks. The winner of that was Vancouver, Quinn Hughes. Cale Makar took third place in the overall voting. Again, what's funny to me, I'll talk about this for just a little bit here. What's funny to me is that this just, I'm trying to put a positive spin on it. This is why Cale Makar is so good. And what I mean by that is he can have a rough, what we consider a rough year, still finish 2 points behind the actual Norris winner, and he'll take third place in the Norris. And that's a bad season for him, right? That to me just means, how lucky we are to have him. Let me see if I can find. Yeah, there you go. So he ended up only getting 9 votes for first place compared to Quinn Hughes' 172. So obviously it wasn't even a competition. Obviously, I'm a homer. I'd love to see him win it again. I could tell you a million reasons why, but it's understandable that Quinn Hughes gets it. He was outrageously good this year. But again, I just think it's a real good testament to Cale Makar and just how skilled of a player he actually is, to have a down year and still get third place in the Norris nominations. The next one, let me see if I can find this, was I don't think they had any rankings thrown out. No, was the Ted Lindsay Award. And that's the award for players that choose their best skater, their best player. And lo and behold, this guy wins it. Nathan MacKinnon is the 2023-24 Ted Lindsay Trophy winner. And again, rightfully so. Players even recognize this, right? And he deserves it. At the very least, through this season, he deserved the Ted Lindsay. And obviously for us, Hart Trophy winner, no problem, right? And if the players could recognize it, obviously the people voting in the actual ballots should be able to recognize this as well. Well, how did it fare as far as the Hart Trophy goes? Remember, your candidates were Nikita Kucherov, Nathan MacKinnon, and Connor McDavid, right? Now, keep in mind, Connor McDavid, despite losing, I will add this, despite losing the Stanley Cup, he won the Conn Smythe. He was the playoff MVP. I could totally, and I see why. I don't doubt his skill. He totally deserved it. Obviously, there's a couple others that I think would have been just as deserving. But it's not often where a player from the losing team wins the Conn Smythe, right? So obviously that's tough shells to kind of compare with when you have Connor McDavid and you have Nikita Kucherov, who points-wise I think was first in that race for points. So he had an outrageously good season, but again, you have to kind of look at accomplishments. Nikita Kucherov, McDavid, they both accomplished great things, and that's not something I want to steal thunder from, want to put shame to, nothing. They played fantastic seasons. But to me, and again, I keep in mind what I'm wearing while I say this, what Nathan MacKinnon did this season was nothing short of stupendous, was nothing short of damn near perfection. And to be completely honest, he without a doubt should have been the across the board Hart Trophy winner. Well, they got the awards people up there, and there's Gary Bettman in front of the mic, and he's got all the previous award winners from this year's award ceremony. And of course, Nathan MacKinnon's already up there winning the Ted Lindsay. And Gary Bettman just says, and the award goes to, he turns to MacKinnon and says, I hope you have another speech prepared. It's Nathan MacKinnon. So finally, after all this time, Nathan MacKinnon is a Hart Trophy winner. And when I tell you I was screaming, I was in the car when it happened. I just parked right in front of the house and just watched it in there. I was elated. My joy was through the roof, because it's kind of like, it felt like kind of like a finally something breaks Colorado's way type deal, because just there's a lot of times where I just feel like the Avs get snuffed in a lot of things. Is that me being biased? Sure. There's some truth to it, though, I would like to point out. But finally, after all this time, number 29, Nate Dogg, is a Hart Trophy winner. Now, let's keep this in mind. Let's put this into perspective here. It went him, Kucherov took second, and Connor McDavid took third. Connor McDavid got 1 first place vote. Nikita Kucherov got 50 first place votes, and Nathan MacKinnon finished with 137 first place votes. This means that it was a landslide of a win. What else can you say, right? Graham here asks, obviously he deserved it. Totally agree. But he continues to say, do you think they gave it to him because of his snub prior? I mean, again, it's subjective. I could totally see why. Obviously, there's a lot of seasons where I was like, he deserves this, right? He totally should have won it. And honestly, anyone that's nominated, there's a reason they were nominated in those top 3, right? Because they accomplished something great in the season. They really brought the value in most valuable players. So anyone that's nominated easily has reason, and the other 2 could be snubs at any point in time, right? Do I think they gave it to him just because of that? No, I don't. I just think it's because the other guys in the previous seasons accomplished greater things. Not to put anything lesser on his seasons and his accomplishments. He could have just as easily won it. Totally worth it, or totally see the reason why and make it worthwhile. But this one was one where it's like, if he didn't win it, there was something wrong. There really, actually, truly was. But he did it, right? I think the greatest reason why he did it is because of his home point streaks. He beat one of Wayne Gretzky's 2 records, where I think it was, so he beats the 35 game record, and I think he finished at 37, 38, somewhere around there, and almost got to Wayne Gretzky's, the overall record, right? Of 40 games, right? Almost basically what he would have had to do is score a point every single home game this season, and he would have had the record. Let me put this in perspective for you. Scoring at home, obviously, good environment, got your fans to support you, but to do that, to have a point, a goal, or an assist in every single home game, that is difficult. That is truly difficult. I would almost say just as hard as winning the Stanley Cup, to be completely honest with you, right? And he almost got there. 37, 38 games, just 5 where he snapped the streak 5 early, I should say. He did continue to score in home games. But that, to me, is the reason why that's the heart right there. Let alone a double Mac trick where he scores four or more goals, another 2 hat tricks, and then this outrageous, crazy, he has 7 games of 5 points or more, something like that. Just amazing, right? Ali says, that his streak broke. For those of you who do not know, my wife, Allie, is a Rangers fan, and it happened to be against the Rangers where that streak snapped. So just rubbing it in a little bit there. But exactly like Graham says, he'll do it again. I 100% believe he'll do it again. So, okay, that being said, though, awards are over. Finally, we can say McKinnon won a Hart Trophy. And it's great. It's a great feeling. I'm still on cloud nine, right? One last item that I did want to get into today before we wrap up was the fact that the schedule release is going to be right around the corner. And obviously next week it's going to be a lot of news. We're going to talk free agency. So I wanted to kind of get that in here just as a last kind of housekeeping item. The preseason schedule has been released for the Colorado Avalanche. Let me pull that up again here. I had it, then I didn't. So let me see. Oh, I thought they pinned it. I guess not. That's okay, though. They will play a few games. Boy, how far along did it go? Well, preseason, I guess it doesn't ultimately matter, but it's out. If you want to go and check it out on the Colorado Avalanche Facebook, Instagram, Twitter pages, wherever you can go and check and see who they play. Fun little tidbit. They're going to play Utah a couple times, so be fun to get them in my home state. Obviously, I'm just next town over from the Delta Center, so it'll be fun to kind of go and see my team that I grew up with, and then the team that's new in town play each other. So again, super excited to have, I guess, my two favorite teams play. I guess I can say that, and I will keep them on same pedestals. Obviously, hometown team and team that I've grown up with all my life. We'll keep them in one. So with the schedule release, though, the question that I pose to you guys, and I will then answer my own, is what matchups are you excited to see the most? All things considered. So there's a couple that I have for personal reasons. First one, I'm interested to see, and this carries back from a couple years ago now. I'm interested to see the game in Seattle against the Kraken just to see if the boos continue to rain down for Cale Makar whenever he touches the puck. I do find it just the most bizarre thing that they obviously, it was because of the hit against Jared McCann that knocked him out, but it's like, okay, but you also failed to mention that in that same series, one of your guys broke our guys' neck, and we're not mad about it, right? It's like, it is what it is, but I'm just curious. It's more of a curiosity thing, just to see if the boos continue to rain down for Cale Makar. But other than that, though, I'm kind of interested to see how the Avalanche fare in the Central Division as a whole, because I think this off season, the Central Division is going to get much better, right? And that's obviously Utah having now all this money to just spend, right, is going to get better, right? How much tougher is Utah going to be for Colorado, right? Saros, which I think that I just saw somewhere, it sounds like they're closing in on an 8-year deal for Nashville to stay with UC Saros. So he's gonna have some great money. He's gonna want to play up to that. Nashville's gonna be good again, right? Keep in mind they had that little streak where Nashville just could not lose, right? To me, it's just Central Division, right? I'm interested to see every single one of those games because I think it's going to get tougher. Are the Avalanche then up for the task? Keep in mind, they finished third in the Central Division after it was just this really tight race, right? The entire time, the entire season, for that first place. And then obviously toward the end, Dallas really took off. And the Avalanche fell back a little bit. But the other one that I guess I will say, I guess two. I pulled a couple more. Tampa Bay Lightning in Tampa, obviously, to go back to the place where you won the cup. I've kind of started to enjoy that series now that there's no like stress on it and stuff like that. Let's see. Oops. I've started to enjoy that a little bit more, right? As far as the matchup, it's really good. Obviously, now that we have the two Hart Trophy candidates going back at it the very next year in Tampa, interested to see kind of what'll happen, right? Because the last one we did, not very good, right? Didn't enjoy it. So, and then the last one, the one that just constantly feels like a thorn in my side for some stupid reason, is in Pittsburgh, believe it or not. Just because the last couple of times we've been there, we've lost in this dramatic or just butt-kicking fashion where for me, just personal little thing, it's just like, we just need to go in and win. We just need to go in and do. So those, I'd say, just kind of high level, first impression before the schedule is even released. Those are the ones that I'm going to look forward to. And obviously we'll dissect the schedule when it comes out, and kind of take it month by month or something like that. But we'll let you know. But I think it should be here in the next few days. I mean, I don't think it's going to be anything over a week. I mean, they tend to have it pretty locked up within the next week or two, or excuse me, week right after the final. So it should be out here pretty soon. So with that being said, that takes us to the end of the episode. Thank you, everyone, for joining and following along on this episode of the Cluster Puck Podcast. Again, we miss Brit. Obviously, she should be here next week. Wish her and her travels all the safety, and hopefully Mac, her son, does very well in these tournaments, and all the good stuff. So that being said, thank you, everyone, for joining in this episode of the Cluster Puck Podcast. Again, if you like what you saw here, don't forget, please, to like and subscribe, follow the MHRT network so you can get notified when shows like the Cluster Puck Podcast go live. You can follow us on it, follow them on the various social media platforms that you're choosing. If you want to follow us, obviously in the off season, content isn't posted very often, but if you want to follow us, you can follow us at ClusterPuckAvs on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. And if you want to follow us on Facebook, you can follow us on Facebook at the Cluster Puck Podcast. With that being said, we'll see what happens in the next week. It's going to be a lot of good stuff. A lot of good stuff. I'm sure it's going to be, the content's going to provide itself. I'll just put it that way. So with that being said, have an enjoyable and safe weekend. We'll see what happens at the draft. We'll see what happens in free agency. And as always, go Avs, go.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast racking up the flame out. So high, I might never come down, so what, this is my lifestyle. Wait a minute, work hard.